Did you know that 46% of your procrastination tendency is genetic? Or that your brain's limbic system actively fights against your best intentions by seeking immediate dopamine hits instead of delayed rewards? Picture this. You sit down to work on an important project, but somehow find yourself scrolling through social media an hour later. Sound familiar? These brain mechanics explain why many of us struggle despite our best intentions. The science reveals why simply trying harder rarely works for overcoming procrastination. This video explains the neurological battle happening inside your head and gives you a practical 3-step interruption method that works with your brain's wiring. Stay tuned to discover why willpower alone isn't the answer. Why your brain loves to lie about time. Have you ever told yourself, "I'll have more time tomorrow," only to find tomorrow just as busy? It's a familiar promise we make when postponing tasks. This magical future where our schedules clear up and motivation flows freely. Yet somehow, that ideal tomorrow never actually arrives. This is temporal self-deception, a fascinating psychological phenomenon where our brains systematically misjudge future time availability. We create optimistic fantasies about tomorrow that bear little resemblance to reality, like a faulty timer that consistently underestimates how long the cooking process will take. Research from the Journal of Behavioral Decision-Making reveals we systematically underestimate task duration by 40 to 60%. That report you think needs 2 hours? It probably requires closer to 3 or 4. That website update you've allocated a day for? You might need the entire week. This dramatic miscalculation forms a consistent pattern in how our brains process future time. Psychologists call this the planning fallacy. First identified by Nobel Prize-winning researcher Daniel Kahneman, it describes our tendency to believe future tasks will take less time than similar past tasks actually took. We make these predictions despite having concrete evidence to the contrary from our own experiences. This is why every time we underestimate our tasks, history repeats itself. Think about the last time you worked on a major presentation. How long did you predict it would take versus how long it actually took? Most of us would admit our prediction was wildly optimistic. Yet the next time we face a similar presentation, we make the same optimistic prediction, dismissing our previous experience. This time distortion also affects how we remember past procrastination episodes. Studies from the University of Toronto show we remember past procrastination as far less stressful than it actually was. Your brain runs a selective memory program, downplaying the anxiety you felt when racing to meet a deadline or the embarrassment of submitting rushed work. By the time you're facing the next task, those emotional warnings have been erased from your working memory. When we examine present bias, our brain's tendency to value immediate rewards far more than future benefits, the picture becomes clearer. Neuroimaging studies show our brain's reward centers activate intensely for immediate rewards. When considering the same reward delayed into the future, that neural activity drops dramatically. We see this in everyday decisions. When choosing between scrolling social media now versus working on a project with future payoff, our brains evaluate these options unequally. The immediate dopamine hit from checking Instagram creates a stronger neural response than the abstract future benefit of completing your project. When you're choosing between starting that report and watching one more YouTube video, you're making a neurologically imbalanced decision. Your brain experiences these options differently, heavily weighting immediate pleasure over future reward. This temporal misjudgment occurs regardless of education level, intelligence, or awareness of the planning fallacy. Even experts fall into this trap when estimating time for tasks in their domain of expertise. Neuroscientists at Princeton have discovered that when we think about our future selves, our brains show activity patterns similar to when we think about strangers. Your brain processes future you as almost a different person, someone with more time, more discipline, and more motivation than present you. This creates a perfect environment for procrastination. When you postpone a task, you're passing it to this future you, a person your brain doesn't fully identify with, making it easier to burden them with your current responsibilities. There's also an evolutionary angle. For most of human history, immediate threats and opportunities were more relevant to survival than long-term planning. Our ancestors needed to respond to predators, find food, and secure shelter, all immediate concerns. This evolutionary wiring remains despite our modern environment requiring more long-term planning. Why do we continue deceiving ourselves about procrastination? Our brains prioritize present comfort over future benefits, creating elaborate false narratives about time availability to justify these choices. This self-deception allows us to feel better about choices that prioritize immediate comfort, even when those choices conflict with long-term goals. What makes this challenging is that our rational mind knows these stories are false. You're aware that tomorrow will likely be just as busy as today. You recognize that starting earlier would reduce stress. Yet this intellectual awareness often isn't enough to override the powerful psychological mechanisms driving procrastination. Traditional productivity advice often assumes rational time decisions based on accurate forecasting. But understanding temporal self-deception shows why willpower and scheduling apps aren't enough. We're fighting against fundamental cognitive biases that distort time perception. Effective procrastination strategies must account for these biases. Rather than expecting perfect time estimation, we need systems that compensate for predictable temporal misjudgments. This might include automatically doubling time estimates, creating implementation intentions, or using pre-commitment strategies that lock in decisions before temporal biases take effect. The neurological battle in your brain. That self-deception around time isn't happening in isolation. It's the symptom of a much deeper neurological conflict. While we blame ourselves for lacking willpower, neuroscience reveals something far more interesting. Two distinct brain regions literally fighting for control over your behavior, with fundamentally opposing priorities and different levels of evolutionary development. What if procrastination isn't your fault, but the result of an actual war happening inside your brain? Neuroimaging studies have captured this battle in real time. When you face a challenging task, two major neural systems activate simultaneously with competing agendas, like a neurological tug-of-war where each side pulls in opposite directions. In one corner, we have the limbic system, the emotional center of your brain that we explored in Section 2. This ancient neural network processes emotions such as fear and anxiety, designed to seek pleasure and avoid pain immediately. It's impulsive, reactive, and completely unconcerned with your long-term goals or deadlines. In the opposing corner stands your prefrontal cortex, the most recently evolved part of your brain, located just behind your forehead. This is your brain's rational command center, responsible for executive functions like decision-making, planning, and impulse control. Unlike your limbic system, the prefrontal cortex can envision future consequences and delay gratification. These two neural systems have fundamentally different objectives when facing a challenging task. Your limbic system evaluates tasks purely on emotional terms. Does this feel good or bad right now? If a task triggers feelings of boredom, anxiety, or frustration, your limbic system treats these emotions as threats to be avoided. When you postpone starting that important project, it's because your limbic system has identified something unpleasant about the task. Perhaps it seems overwhelming, tedious, or carries the risk of failure. In response, the amygdala activates, steering you toward immediate relief. Checking social media, watching videos, or any activity that provides instant gratification. Your prefrontal cortex operates on an entirely different timeline. It weighs long-term benefits against short-term discomfort, allowing you to push through temporary unpleasantness for greater future rewards. While your limbic system focuses exclusively on the present moment, your prefrontal cortex projects into the future, seeing the consequences of procrastination and the benefits of taking action now. But there's a critical disadvantage that tips the scales in this neural battle. Your prefrontal cortex requires significantly more energy to function than your limbic system. It's like comparing a modern electric vehicle to an old gas guzzler. One is more sophisticated but demands more resources to operate. This energy demand creates a vulnerability. When you're mentally fatigued, stressed, or sleep-deprived, your prefrontal cortex loses power first. The rational part of your brain runs on a rechargeable battery that depletes throughout the day, while your emotional limbic system operates on a more consistent and primitive energy supply. Picture this. It's 4 p.m. at the office, and you've been in meetings all day. You finally sit down to complete that important quarterly report due tomorrow. As you stare at the empty document, you feel an overwhelming urge to check emails or browse news headlines instead. This isn't random behavior. It's your tired prefrontal cortex losing the battle to your limbic system, which seeks the immediate relief of distraction over the delayed reward of task completion. Research shows that as mental fatigue increases, the prefrontal cortex's ability to override emotional impulses diminishes significantly. This explains why procrastination often worsens later in the day or during periods of high stress. Your brain's rational governor is literally running out of fuel, allowing the limbic system to dominate decision-making. Brain imaging studies confirm this neurological power struggle. When procrastinators face challenging tasks, researchers observe increased activity in the limbic system, particularly the amygdala, while the prefrontal regions show reduced activation compared to non-procrastinators. The neurochemical dopamine plays a central role in this conflict as well. When you complete a task, your brain releases dopamine, creating a sense of satisfaction. However, procrastinators often struggle with this process. They delay tasks and miss out on the rewards associated with completion. Instead, the procrastinating brain learns to seek dopamine through easier routes, the immediate pleasure of distraction rather than the delayed satisfaction of accomplishment. Each time you choose the quick dopamine hit of checking messages over working on a challenging project, you strengthen the neural pathways that lead to procrastination. This is why procrastination feels less like a conscious choice and more like being pulled by an invisible force toward distraction. When your limbic system takes control, it genuinely feels easier to postpone the task than to push through discomfort. You're experiencing the result of an actual neurological tug-of-war. This neurological understanding explains why traditional anti-procrastination advice often fails. Telling yourself to just do it or try harder doesn't address the underlying neural conflict. You're fighting against powerful brain systems that evolved over millions of years. The specific pathways in your brain linked to procrastination are involved in decision-making, motivation, and self-control. Procrastinators often have difficulty activating these pathways, leading to task delays. This isn't a character flaw. It's a particular pattern of brain activation that can be modified with the right approach. Procrastination versus laziness, the critical difference. Understanding the neurological battle in our brains raises an important question that few of us stop to consider. Could the lazy label you've been giving yourself actually be making your procrastination worse? Science suggests these seemingly interchangeable behaviors actually stem from fundamentally different psychological roots, and confusing them might be sabotaging your attempts to change. Let's clear up a common misconception right away. Procrastination and laziness are not the same thing, though we often use these terms interchangeably in everyday conversation. This distinction has profound implications for how we understand and overcome procrastination. When we look at behavioral patterns, procrastinators often work harder overall than non-procrastinators due to last-minute cramming. Think about your own experience. That night before a deadline, when you frantically completed an assignment, heart racing, fingers typing furiously until 3 a.m. That intense burst of activity demonstrates procrastination, not laziness. Procrastinators typically compress their work into shorter time frames, producing lower quality results despite greater effort. The key difference between procrastination and laziness lies in the active choice element. Procrastination involves deliberately choosing alternative activities despite knowing there will be negative consequences. When you scroll through social media instead of writing that report, you're making an active choice to engage in something else. Laziness, by contrast, is characterized by a general lack of activity or motivation to engage in any task. The procrastinator who cleans their entire apartment instead of studying for an exam isn't exhibiting laziness. They're being productive, just not at the task that matters most. Procrastinators typically experience higher levels of stress and anxiety than non-procrastinators. This emotional burden comes from the awareness of what they should be doing, coupled with the discomfort of not doing it. The procrastinator feels the weight of unfulfilled obligations and experiences guilt, shame, and anxiety, emotional states largely absent in simple laziness. Consider Sarah, who regularly calls herself lazy when she puts off important work projects. Each time she uses this label, she feels worse about herself, creating a shame spiral that makes focusing even harder. The next time she faces a challenging task, the memory of past failures intensifies her anxiety, making procrastination even more likely. What Sarah doesn't realize is that her problem isn't laziness, it's emotional regulation. Research shows procrastination is often linked to perfectionism, essentially the opposite of laziness. The perfectionist procrastinator delays starting tasks because they fear not performing them well enough. When you put off writing that important email because you're worried about finding exactly the right words, that's perfectionism-driven procrastination, not laziness. Consider high-achieving individuals who struggle with procrastination. Leonardo da Vinci took 16 years to complete the Mona Lisa, working on it sporadically while juggling multiple other projects. Successful modern entrepreneurs, academics, and creatives produce significant work, yet still battle procrastination tendencies. These examples highlight that procrastination can coexist with high achievement and productivity. The distinction becomes even more important when we consider the neurological components. Procrastination involves specific neural pathways related to emotional regulation. When faced with a task that triggers negative emotions, boredom, anxiety, frustration, or fear of failure, the procrastinator's brain activates avoidance mechanisms to escape the uncomfortable feelings. This is why labeling yourself as lazy when you procrastinate is potentially harmful. Such self-labeling reinforces negative self-perception as nothing to address the actual emotional regulation issue at the heart of procrastination. The shame created by this negative self-talk often leads to more procrastination as you attempt to avoid additional negative feelings. At its core, procrastination is fundamentally an emotional regulation problem related to avoiding negative feelings associated with certain tasks. It's about managing discomfort. Each time you procrastinate, you're making a short-term mood repair, trading immediate relief for future stress and poorer outcomes. This emotional component explains why traditional productivity advice often fails procrastinators. Tips like just start or make a better schedule don't address the underlying emotional dynamics driving the behavior. When we misidentify procrastination as laziness, we apply the wrong solutions. Strategies designed to increase motivation or energy won't resolve an emotional regulation problem. The self-regulation failure that characterizes procrastination explains why many high-functioning, motivated individuals still struggle with it. This realization can be liberating. Your procrastination isn't a character flaw or moral failing, but a specific behavioral pattern with identifiable triggers. Understanding procrastination as an emotional regulation issue rather than laziness changes everything about how we approach solutions. Effective interventions must address the emotional components driving procrastination behavior. Learning to recognize, accept, and work with uncomfortable emotions becomes crucial to overcoming procrastination patterns. This perspective shift allows for greater self-compassion and creates space for constructive change. Success isn't just about completing more tasks in less time. It's about developing better emotional regulation strategies and creating conditions that reduce avoidance behaviors. The surprising statistics: you're not alone. Now that we've distinguished between procrastination and laziness, let's confront a surprising truth. This struggle you're facing is remarkably universal. Those emotional regulation strategies we just explored are so crucial because procrastination isn't your personal failing. It's wired into human psychology at a fundamental level. Would it shock you to learn that a staggering 95% of college students admit to procrastinating, with a substantial 50% doing so consistently and chronically? Imagine this. It's 11 p.m. You have a paper due tomorrow, and instead of typing that conclusion paragraph, you're organizing your desk drawers or scrolling through social media. The anxiety builds, yet something keeps you from tackling the task. This scenario plays out in dorm rooms and apartments across the country every night. When we look at the general population, approximately 1 in 5 adults identifies as a chronic procrastinator. That's 20% of all adults. People from all walks of life fighting this same battle with task avoidance and emotional regulation. What makes these statistics particularly revealing is their consistency across different demographics and achievement levels. Procrastination doesn't discriminate based on intelligence, ambition, or capability. The emotional regulation challenges that drive procrastination affect people across vastly different professions and skill sets. This prevalence reveals something profound about procrastination. It's a universal human tendency rooted in how our brains process discomfort. Perhaps even more fascinating is what research tells us about the genetic component of procrastination. Twin studies have revealed that approximately 46% of procrastination tendencies can be attributed to genetic factors. This biological predisposition interacts with your environment in complex ways. If you grew up with parents who modeled last-minute rushes or attended schools that rewarded cramming, these environmental factors likely amplified your genetic tendencies. Conversely, structured environments with consistent routines might have helped mitigate inherited procrastination traits. This genetic component helps explain why some people seem to naturally resist procrastination while others fight an uphill battle. Your tendency to postpone tasks is influenced by inherited traits that affect how your brain processes tasks, manages emotions, and responds to discomfort. Understanding this genetic influence provides a scientific foundation for approaching procrastination with greater self-compassion. College environments create a perfect storm for procrastination behaviors. The academic setting, with its long-term deadlines, competing priorities, and high-pressure evaluations, creates fertile ground for procrastination to flourish. These environments demand precisely the emotional regulation skills that procrastinators struggle with. This concentration of procrastination in academic settings doesn't mean students are less disciplined than others. Instead, it suggests that certain environments can exacerbate procrastination tendencies that exist within most of us. The same person who procrastinates on term papers might be perfectly punctual in contexts where different emotional triggers are present. Our digital landscape has amplified procrastination tendencies across the board. The rise of constant connectivity has created new challenges for emotional regulation. Our devices provide immediate access to alternatives that deliver instant gratification. Social media, entertainment, news feeds, all just a tap away when we face a challenging task. These digital platforms are specifically engineered to capture your attention through psychological mechanisms that target the same limbic system we discussed earlier. The notifications, likes, and endless scrolling features exploit your brain's preference for immediate rewards, making it increasingly difficult to choose delayed gratification in the form of productive work. As our connectivity has increased, so have procrastination rates across various demographic groups. This isn't coincidental. It's a predictable outcome of surrounding ourselves with powerful distractions designed to be as compelling as possible. Your struggle isn't happening in a vacuum. It's occurring in perhaps the most distraction-rich environment humans have ever inhabited. What's particularly interesting is what procrastination research reveals about high achievers. Many successful individuals don't avoid procrastination entirely. They procrastinate selectively and strategically. Some research suggests that certain forms of procrastination may serve creative processes by allowing ideas to incubate, though this benefit typically comes with costs that outweigh the advantages. Many accomplished writers, artists, and scientists report working on important but less urgent tasks to avoid the most pressing ones. While not ideal, this approach channels procrastination energy into productive alternatives rather than pure avoidance. What do these findings mean for your battle with procrastination? First, they offer permission to stop viewing procrastination as a personal moral failing. It's better understood as a design challenge of the human brain rather than a character defect. You're experiencing a common psychological pattern that affects nearly everyone. Second, these insights highlight that overcoming procrastination isn't about becoming a different type of person, but rather implementing specific strategies that account for these universal tendencies. The most effective approaches create systems that work around these responses or transform how we relate to them. Finally, the widespread nature of procrastination reminds us that even small improvements in how you manage task avoidance can create significant advantages. Developing better strategies for emotional regulation and task initiation can dramatically improve
hidden
your
costs
outcomes
beyond
relative
missed
to
deadlines.
others facing the same challenges. While understanding procrastination's nature gives us a map for addressing it, we've overlooked the invisible damage it's silently causing throughout your life. The true cost of procrastination extends far beyond rushed work and missed deadlines. Research has uncovered alarming connections between chronic procrastination and physical health that should make anyone reconsider their delay tactics. Chronic procrastination significantly impacts our physical well-being. Studies show that habitual procrastinators report 63% more health problems than non-procrastinators. This stark difference reflects how the continuous stress cycle of procrastination affects our bodies. Delaying important tasks elevates cortisol levels, which, when prolonged, weakens immune function and increases illness susceptibility. This stress response persists even when we're not actively thinking about delayed tasks. Many procrastinators experience disrupted sleep with thoughts about unfinished work, making it difficult to rest properly. This creates a cycle where poor sleep impairs decision-making, making procrastination more likely the next day. The stress also manifests as digestive issues, appetite changes, and irregular eating patterns, all directly connected to putting things off. I learned this lesson personally when I repeatedly postponed scheduling my annual physical. "I'll do it next week" turned into 6 months of delay. When I finally went, my doctor discovered elevated blood pressure that required immediate attention. Had I continued procrastinating, I might have missed an early warning sign of a serious condition. This experience showed me how procrastination on health matters can have real consequences. Research links chronic procrastination to increased risk of hypertension and cardiovascular disease. This makes sense considering procrastinators often delay health-promoting behaviors like exercise, medical checkups, and preventative care. A comprehensive study of Swedish university students found procrastination associated with worse mental health outcomes, including increased depression and anxiety symptoms. The same research revealed connections to poor sleep quality, physical inactivity, increased loneliness, and financial difficulties, painting a troubling picture of procrastination's wide-ranging effects. The impact extends beyond physical health into our relationships and professional lives. Each time we delay work that affects others, we send messages about our reliability. Late deliveries, missed deadlines, and unfulfilled commitments gradually erode others' trust in us. In personal relationships, procrastination often manifests as broken promises. Repeatedly telling your partner you'll handle a household task, but consistently delaying creates tension that transforms from being about the specific chore to deeper questions about commitment and respect. This pattern affects professional relationships similarly. When colleagues notice delayed work and last-minute scrambling, they adjust their expectations accordingly. You might find yourself excluded from important projects or passed over for leadership opportunities. This reshapes your professional identity and limits career growth. The financial impact follows naturally. Chronic procrastinators experience reduced career advancement and direct financial penalties through missed promotions, lower performance evaluations affecting raises, or formal disciplinary actions. For the self-employed, procrastination leads to lost clients, billing delays, and inconsistent income. Over a career, these effects compound into significant lifetime earning losses. Perhaps the most damaging cost occurs internally. Each broken promise to yourself about completing a task represents a form of self-betrayal. These accumulate over time, eroding your sense of self-trust and personal integrity. You begin questioning your own word, creating a painful situation where you simultaneously know you should trust yourself less while needing self-trust more than ever to break the procrastination cycle. This damage extends to your self-concept and confidence. Repeatedly failing to act on your stated intentions creates negative beliefs about your capabilities and character. You might begin viewing yourself as inherently unreliable or lacking willpower. These perceptions become part of your identity, making it harder to see yourself as someone who follows through consistently. This negative self-perception breeds shame and self-criticism, which paradoxically makes procrastination more likely. When you feel ashamed about past procrastination, you tend to avoid similar tasks that trigger these uncomfortable emotions. What begins as simple task avoidance evolves into a pattern of emotional avoidance that becomes increasingly difficult to break. The research from Sweden adds another dimension, finding procrastination significantly associated with loneliness. This highlights how procrastination affects social well-being and potentially leads to isolation. The relationship works both ways. Loneliness may increase procrastination, while procrastination behaviors contribute to social disconnection. These costs cascade through life. Health problems lead to increased expenses and reduced quality of life. Relationship challenges create stress that further impacts health. Career limitations produce financial pressure affecting security. Self-trust erosion undermines confidence in facing new challenges. Each dimension amplifies the others, creating a comprehensive pattern of life limitation far beyond simple time mismanagement. The intention-action gap explained. The damage of procrastination is clear, but here's the more puzzling question. Why do we continue this self-destructive pattern even when we genuinely intend to change? Brain scans reveal something surprising. Your planning brain and your doing brain operate on completely different neural pathways, creating a gap that swallows even your strongest intentions. This phenomenon has a name: the intention-action gap. It functions like a broken bridge in your mind. On one side stands your planning self with ambitious goals and clear vision, but the crossing to implementation has collapsed, leaving your doing self stranded, without a path forward. This explains why your Sunday night plans to wake up early, exercise, and start that important project somehow evaporate by Monday morning. You meant what you said. You weren't lying when you set those alarms. Yet something fundamental happens between planning and execution that seems beyond your control. Research shows just how prevalent this disconnect is. Our intentions, regardless of how sincere, only predict about 30% of our actual behaviors. Nearly 70% of what we actually do isn't directly connected to what we plan to do, regardless of how committed we felt when making those plans. This isn't a character flaw. It's a design feature of human cognition affecting virtually everyone. The brain processes future tasks through entirely different neural circuitry than it uses for present tasks. When you're making plans, you're primarily engaging your prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions like planning, decision-making, and impulse control. This analytical brain region makes logical assessments about what should be done, understanding consequences and appreciating long-term benefits. But when execution time arrives, a powerful shift occurs. Your emotional limbic system, which drives in-the-moment decisions and prioritizes immediate emotional states, takes control. The limbic system isn't concerned with your carefully crafted schedule, it responds to what feels good or bad right now. This neurological handoff explains why motivation vanishes precisely when you need it most. Consider what happens when you plan to write a report first thing Monday. Your prefrontal cortex reasons, starting Monday gives me plenty of time before Wednesday's deadline. It makes perfect sense when planning. But Monday morning arrives, and suddenly checking email feels irresistibly urgent. Your limbic system has taken the wheel, seeking immediate gratification rather than delayed rewards. This conflict is amplified by temporal discounting, your brain's tendency to irrationally devalue future rewards compared to immediate ones. When choosing between immediate pleasure, scrolling through social media, and a distant reward, completing a project ahead of schedule, your brain applies a steep discount to the future benefit, making the immediate reward seem disproportionately valuable. Neuroscience research has captured this process. When making decisions involving delayed rewards, the prefrontal cortex shows increased activity. But with immediate rewards, the limbic system dominates. This activation imbalance explains why working on that presentation might lose out to watching just one YouTube video that somehow multiplies into an hour of distraction. Have you ever noticed how different you feel when planning versus doing? How confident Sunday night you feels compared to Monday morning you? This isn't coincidence. It's your brain operating in fundamentally different modes. Implementation intentions offer one powerful solution. Unlike vague intentions, "I'll exercise more," implementation intentions create specific plans detailing when, where, and how you'll perform a task. "I will go to the gym Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 a.m. This specificity creates mental triggers that bypass decision-making at the moment of action, making behavior more automatic and less vulnerable to limbic system interference. The gap also manifests in how we conceptualize our future selves. When planning, we often imagine our future self as someone with more energy and discipline than our current self. Future me will definitely have the willpower to resist distractions, we tell ourselves, essentially volunteering our future self for challenges we wouldn't accept in the present moment. This mental accounting trick allows us to feel productive by setting ambitious plans while postponing actual discomfort. It's like ordering salad for tomorrow while eating cake today. The future healthy choice makes us feel virtuous without requiring immediate sacrifice. Understanding this neurological reality explains why willpower alone often falls short. Forcing yourself to follow through puts your prefrontal cortex in direct competition with your limbic system. And the limbic system, being more primitive and efficient, frequently wins, especially when you're tired or stressed. This insight transforms how we approach habit formation. Effective strategies don't rely on unrealistic expectations of perfect follow-through. Instead, they account for the predictable disconnection between planning and action, creating systems that work with your brain's natural tendencies. Reducing the activation energy required to start difficult tasks often proves more effective than increasing motivation. Similarly, environmental cues that trigger automatic behaviors can bypass decision points where intentions typically falter. Rather than berating yourself for failing to follow through, recognizing this gap invites a more compassionate understanding of your behavior patterns. The disconnect isn't evidence of personal weakness, but a predictable feature of human cognition, one that can be bridged with the right approach. The three-step interruption method, overview. This understanding of the intention-action gap begs a critical question. If our brains are wired to procrastinate, how do we actually change our behavior? While most productivity advice tells you to just push through it, brain research suggests a counterintuitive approach, one that works with your neurological circuitry rather than against it. That approach is the three-step interruption method, a framework specifically designed to intercept procrastination before it takes control. This method acknowledges our brain's natural tendencies and provides practical strategies to work with our neurological reality, not fight against it. Think about how often you've tried to force yourself to just do it or try harder when facing procrastination. These strategies typically fail because they're asking your prefrontal cortex to win a direct confrontation with your limbic system, a battle it's neurologically disadvantaged to fight. It's like trying to stop a rushing river with your bare hands instead of building channels to redirect the flow. The three-step interruption method takes a fundamentally different approach. Instead of relying on willpower, which neurological research shows is a limited resource, it focuses on interrupting the procrastination cycle at its vulnerable points before emotional resistance fully activates. The method consists of three key components. 1. Micro-commitments. These are intentionally tiny actions designed to bypass your brain's resistance to starting. When you commit to just 2 minutes of work instead of an entire project, you're essentially sneaking past the limbic system's emotional alarm bells. This works because the greatest resistance occurs during the transition from not working to working. Once you've started, continuing becomes significantly easier. Number 2. Environment redesign. Our physical and digital surroundings heavily influence our behavior, often without conscious awareness. By strategically modifying your environment to remove procrastination triggers and enhance productivity cues, you can shape your behavior before the choice to procrastinate even arises. This approach creates conditions where you don't need to rely heavily on willpower. 3. Emotional regulation techniques. These help you identify and manage the negative emotions that trigger avoidance behaviors. By developing skills to work with difficult emotions, rather than trying to escape them through procrastination, you're addressing the root cause rather than just the symptoms. What makes this method particularly effective is that it works at specific trigger points in the procrastination cycle. Research on habit interruption shows that behaviors are most effectively changed when interventions target the precise moments where decisions are made. The three-step interruption method identifies these critical junctures and provides specific techniques to redirect behavior at each point. The moment before starting a task, micro-commitments. The environmental cues that trigger distraction, environment redesign. The emotional responses that drive avoidance, emotional regulation. This combined approach yields better results than single strategy methods. Studies on behavior change consistently show that interventions addressing multiple aspects of a problem tend to be more effective than those focusing on a single technique. By targeting the emotional, environmental, and behavioral aspects of procrastination simultaneously, the three-step method provides a comprehensive solution. Each component addresses a different facet of the procrastination cycle. Micro-commitments tackle the initial resistance when your brain tries to convince you that the task is too overwhelming. Environment redesign addresses contextual triggers that make procrastination more likely. Emotional regulation techniques help manage uncomfortable feelings driving procrastination, whether anxiety about performance, boredom, or frustration. Together, these components create a system for intercepting procrastination before it takes hold. Rather than fighting against an established procrastination pattern, like trying to stop a train at full speed, this method prevents that momentum from building in the first place. The approach offers flexibility. Techniques within each component can be tailored to your individual patterns and specific tasks. The micro-commitment that works for starting a work project might differ from what helps you begin exercising, while the environment that supports focused writing might not work for household chores. The three-step interruption method breaks the procrastination cycle by intercepting the impulse before it takes control. This science-backed approach combines micro-commitments that bypass initial resistance, strategic environment redesign that removes triggers, and emotional regulation techniques that address the feelings driving avoidance. This represents a fundamental shift in how we think about productivity. Instead of viewing procrastination as a character flaw requiring more discipline, it recognizes procrastination as a predictable neurological response that can be systematically interrupted and redirected. This understanding makes the method more effective and removes the shame and self-criticism that often accompany procrastination, which themselves can trigger more avoidance behavior. Step 1. Micro-commitments that bypass resistance. Having established that procrastination is a predictable neurological response rather than a character flaw, let's examine the first and perhaps most powerful intervention in our arsenal. The moment between not working and working is where procrastination wins or loses. But there's a psychological loophole your brain can't defend against. This loophole is what psychologists call micro-commitments. Tiny actions so small that they fly under your brain's resistance radar. Think about the last time you faced a challenging task. The hardest part wasn't the middle or even the end, it was simply starting. That initial transition from doing nothing to doing something represents the highest barrier to productivity, and it's precisely where micro-commitments make their impact. What makes these small commitments so effective is that they align with how our brains naturally function. When we attempt to force ourselves into complex tasks, our limbic system, that ancient emotional brain we discussed earlier, sounds all its alarm bells. But when we commit to just 2 minutes of work, the alarm stays silent. The task seems so manageable that it doesn't trigger the emotional avoidance response that normally leads to procrastination. This phenomenon connects directly to the Zeigarnik effect, discovered by psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik. Her research revealed that our brains have a natural tendency to focus on unfinished tasks, creating cognitive tension that makes incomplete activities easier to recall than completed ones. When you start a task, even with the smallest action, you activate this effect. Your brain becomes uncomfortable with leaving things unfinished, creating an internal drive to continue. Let's examine some practical implementations of micro-commitments that you can use immediately. The first is the 2-minute rule, which suggests that any task requiring less than 2 minutes should be done immediately. For example, when you receive an email that needs a quick response, answer it right away, rather than adding it to your to-do list. This simple framework prevents small tasks from accumulating into overwhelming backlogs and builds the habit of taking immediate action. For larger tasks, modify this rule by committing to just 2 minutes of work, knowing you can stop after that if needed. If you're dreading a presentation, open PowerPoint and create just the title slide. Often you'll find yourself naturally continuing. Another effective micro-commitment technique is the one-sentence start. With this approach, you commit only to writing the first sentence of a report, coding the first line of a program, or sketching the first outline of a design. Imagine you need to write a project proposal. Simply open the document and type, "This proposal outlines our strategy for the Smith account." The psychological barrier to writing a single sentence is minimal, yet once that first sentence exists, continuing becomes dramatically easier. The third powerful implementation is task decomposition, breaking down large projects into smaller steps. Rather than facing write research paper, you might start with open document and write title. If you're cleaning your apartment, forget about the entire space and simply commit to clear one corner of the coffee table. This technique directly combats the fear of being overwhelmed, which research shows is one of the primary triggers for procrastination. What's particularly interesting about micro-commitments is how they function neurologically. These tiny actions reduce what psychologists call task aversiveness, the perceived difficulty associated with beginning a task. By making the initial action incredibly small, you bypass the avoidance response entirely. This creates a small dopamine release, that feel-good neurotransmitter, which reinforces the behavior and makes it easier to continue. Micro-commitments work regardless of how unmotivated you feel initially. Unlike approaches that rely on inspiration or willpower, they acknowledge that motivation often follows action rather than preceding it. You don't need to feel motivated to take a tiny step, but taking that step often generates the motivation to continue. Our brains dramatically overestimate the discomfort associated with difficult tasks. Studies consistently show that the anticipation of doing unpleasant tasks is typically much worse than the actual experience. Micro-commitments help bridge this gap by making it easy to discover that the task isn't nearly as unpleasant as anticipated. Micro-commitments are particularly effective for perfectionists, who often procrastinate because they associate starting with the pressure of producing perfect work. By focusing solely on a tiny first step, with no quality expectations, like jotting down a rough outline for a presentation, perfectionists can bypass the paralysis that comes from setting impossibly high standards. What makes micro-commitments particularly powerful is that they're customizable to any situation. Whether you're writing a dissertation, cleaning your home, making difficult phone calls, or learning a new skill, the principle remains the same. Reduce the initial action to its smallest possible form. Take that action, and watch as the chains of procrastination begin to fall away. Strategic environment redesign. Now that we've mastered the art of starting tasks, let's turn our attention to the battlefield itself. Just as a chef arranges their kitchen for maximum efficiency, your environment requires strategic design to prevent procrastination, because your surroundings are currently making over 200 decisions for you each day without your permission. Research shows that each time your attention shifts away from your primary task, it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully return to your previous level of concentration. This means a single notification can destroy nearly half an hour of productive work, far more than the few seconds it takes to check the message. These environmental disruptions explain why willpower alone often fails against procrastination. Your digital landscape significantly affects your productivity. Each notification on your device functions like a siren song, engineered specifically to capture your attention. These alerts are strategically designed to exploit your brain's reward system. When your phone pings with a new message or your email tab shows an unread count, your brain receives a small dopamine hit, creating a seeking behavior that pulls you away from focused work. Think about this. Researchers have found that we make hundreds of food choices daily with minimal conscious awareness. The same psychological principle applies to our work decisions. Your brain processes countless environmental cues every minute, many of which silently influence whether you'll stay focused or succumb to distraction. The good news is that you can turn this powerful influence to your advantage through strategic environment redesign. By understanding how your surroundings shape your behavior, you can create an environment that naturally supports focus rather than sabotaging it. One of the most effective techniques in this arsenal is what behavioral scientists call the 20-second rule. This principle operates on a simple truth: humans naturally gravitate toward the path of least resistance. By making procrastination activities just 20 seconds harder to begin and productive activities 20 seconds easier to start, you can dramatically shift your behavioral patterns. For example, if social media is your procrastination vice, simply logging out of your accounts adds that crucial 20-second barrier. Having to enter your username and password creates enough friction to make you pause and reconsider whether scrolling is worth the effort. Conversely, preparing your workspace the night before, laying out the materials you'll need for your priority project, removes friction from your productive path. This friction principle explains why seemingly minor environmental changes can produce dramatic shifts in behavior. It's about adjusting the effort required to engage in different behaviors, not eliminating all possibility of distraction. Digital minimalism offers another powerful strategy. This approach involves intentionally decluttering your digital life, removing unnecessary apps from your phone, unsubscribing from distracting email lists, and disabling non-essential notifications. By simplifying your digital landscape, you eliminate countless potential interruptions before they can capture your attention. Consider implementing digital borders in your workspace. This might mean keeping your phone in another room while working, using website blockers during focused work periods, or creating separate user accounts on your computer for different activities. These boundaries help maintain clear distinctions between work and leisure digital environments. The concept of friction addition and reduction applies throughout your physical workspace as well. If watching TV distracts you, store the remote control in a drawer across the room. If snacking breaks your focus, keep tempting foods in opaque containers on high shelves. Conversely, if drinking water helps you stay focused, keep a filled bottle within arm's reach. Visual cue management represents another essential component of environmental design. Your brain constantly processes visual information that can either trigger procrastination or prompt productive behavior. Create a dedicated workspace with visual reminders of your goals. Something as simple as a visible timer can serve as a powerful focus trigger, while removing visual clues of distracting activities can prevent procrastination before it starts. Many people find they focus better in coffee shops or libraries than at home. These environments contain strong contextual signals that align with productive work. By deliberately designing your visual environment, you can create similar focus-triggering cues in any workspace. What makes environment redesign particularly effective is that it works beneath conscious awareness. Unlike strategies requiring constant vigilance, environmental adjustments continue influencing your behavior, even when you're not actively thinking about them. This passive effectiveness makes environmental design an especially valuable component of any anti-procrastination system. The cumulative impact of these environmental adjustments can be profound. By systematically eliminating procrastination triggers and creating supportive, productive cues, you transform your environment from an adversary into an ally. The most effective environmental changes often appear minor, but target specific behavioral triggers. Placing your phone face down, using noise-canceling headphones, or creating physical separation between work materials and leisure items helps maintain the psychological boundaries essential for staying focused. Step 3. Emotional regulation techniques. Environmental design addresses the external factors of procrastination, but what about the war happening inside your mind? Research reveals a surprising truth. People don't procrastinate because they can't manage time. They procrastinate to escape uncomfortable feelings like anxiety, boredom, and self-doubt. This emotional dimension explains why even with perfect calendars, phone-free spaces, and organized desks, we still avoid important tasks. Neuroscience confirms that procrastination is fundamentally an emotional regulation problem. When we encounter tasks that trigger negative emotions, our brain's natural response seeks relief from discomfort. In your brain, facing a challenging task activates your limbic system, which registers negative emotions and signals danger. Your brain, protecting you from this perceived threat, offers a solution: avoid the task. The relief you feel when closing a document to check social media? That's your brain rewarding avoidance of emotional discomfort. This temporary coping mechanism provides immediate relief at the expense of future well-being. The task remains undone, creating more stress as deadlines approach, reinforcing the procrastination cycle. Perfectionism particularly drives procrastination. Perfectionists set impossibly high standards, and the thought of falling short triggers the brain's threat response. As psychology professor Dr. Clarissa Ong notes, perfectionistic concerns are strongly associated with procrastination because of the fear that one's performance won't meet their excessively high standards. Conventional productivity advice often fails because calendar systems and apps can't address the emotional component. To overcome procrastination, we need techniques targeting emotional triggers directly. Self-compassion serves as a powerful regulation strategy. Research shows kindness toward yourself reduces stress and increases forward momentum. Instead of self-criticism like, "I'm so lazy," try speaking as you would to a friend. "This is difficult and resistance is normal. What small step could make this easier?" Emma, a marketing director, used this approach when facing a major presentation that had her paralyzed with anxiety. Rather than berating herself for procrastinating, she acknowledged her fear of judgment and gave herself permission to create an imperfect first draft. "Once I stopped fighting my feelings and showed myself some compassion," she recalled, "I could actually focus on the content instead of my anxiety." Self-criticism exacerbates stress, activating the brain's threat response further. Treating yourself with kindness reduces emotional threat, allowing your prefrontal cortex to regain control and make rational decisions. Cognitive reframing addresses the emotional dimension by changing how you view tasks. Instead of, "This report will be tedious," shift to, "This report demonstrates my expertise and contributes valuable insights." Creating positive associations reduces limbic resistance, making it easier to begin work. Studies from the Journal of Experimental Psychology demonstrate that reframing tasks in terms of meaning increases both motivation and performance. Implementation intentions provide another practical strategy. Specify exactly when, where, and how you'll complete tasks. "Tomorrow at 9 a.m., I'll sit at my desk with my phone in another room and write the first paragraph." This detailed planning reduces decision fatigue and uncertainty that trigger procrastination. By eliminating ambiguity, you remove opportunities for your brain to rationalize delay. Mindfulness practices offer perhaps the most foundational approach to emotional regulation. Research shows regular meditation strengthens the prefrontal cortex, increasing your ability to process information, think clearly, and resist impulses. This happens because meditation enhances connections to the amygdala, allowing better downregulation of emotional reactivity. Even simple mindfulness exercises help recognize emotional triggers before they lead to procrastination. Noticing thoughts like, "I don't feel like doing this," or physical sensations like shoulder tension creates space between the trigger and your response. This awareness allows you to choose your reaction rather than automatically avoiding tasks. Mindfulness can be integrated into daily activities. Being fully present during walks, exercise, cooking, or journaling develops attentional control and emotional awareness. These practices calm the mind and reduce the power of triggers that lead to avoidance. The 10-10-10 rule asks how you'll feel about procrastinating in 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years. This method helps you see beyond immediate discomfort and consider longer-term impacts. Recognizing that temporary relief leads to greater stress later makes productive action more appealing now. What makes these emotional regulation techniques powerful is that they address procrastination at its source. While environmental strategies remove external triggers, These techniques tackle the internal drivers that prove more persistent. By combining these approaches, self-compassion to reduce threat, cognitive reframing to transform your relationship with tasks, implementation intentions to create specific plans, and mindfulness to recognize triggers before they cause avoidance, you create a comprehensive emotional management system that breaks the procrastination cycle at its core. Real-world applications: work, fitness, and creativity. A comprehensive emotional management system is essential, but it's not one-size-fits-all across your life. Consider this. The same person who decisively completes work deadlines might have a dusty guitar in the corner they haven't touched in months, or workout clothes with tags still attached. What makes procrastination so persistent is how differently it manifests across the various domains of your life, requiring domain-specific applications of the three-step method. Procrastination wears different masks depending on what you're avoiding. Each domain activates unique emotional responses and environmental triggers that need specifically tailored interruption strategies. While the core principles of micro-commitments, environment redesign, and emotional regulation remain consistent, their application varies significantly across work, fitness, and creative pursuits. Before diving into specific domains, understand that the fundamental strategy remains constant. Identify the emotional barrier, create the smallest possible entry point, adjust your environment to support action, and reframe the emotional experience. The differences lie in how these principles are tailored to address domain-specific challenges. In the workplace, procrastination often manifests through fear of evaluation, uncertainty about starting points, or anxiety about complexity. Like a mountain climber who must find the first handhold before ascending, your micro-commitments should focus on creating initial engagement with the task. Instead of tackling an entire report, commit to writing just a single sentence or outlining one section. For instance, when facing a quarterly analysis report, open the document and write just the title or the first paragraph heading. This minimal commitment initiates momentum without triggering resistance. Once you've started, the Zeigarnik effect naturally makes it continuing easier. Environment redesign in the workplace involves creating a dedicated deep workspace where distractions are minimized. This might mean using website blockers, turning your phone to airplane mode, or working in a conference room rather than at your regular desk. The physical separation creates a psychological boundary supporting focused attention. The emotional regulation component for work tasks centers on reframing. Shift your focus from the difficulty to the value by thinking, "This report allows me to demonstrate my analytical skills and contributes valuable insights to our team's strategy." Transitioning to fitness procrastination, we encounter a different landscape entirely. Here, the emotional barriers include anticipated discomfort, perfectionism about performance, or the immediate gratification of relaxation. Like a swimmer testing cold water with their toes before diving in, the 5-minute start rule perfectly embodies the micro-commitment approach. Commit to just 5 minutes of exercise with permission to stop afterward. Once you're in your workout clothes and moving, continuation momentum often takes over. Those 5 minutes frequently extend into a complete workout because the initial resistance has been overcome. The anticipation of exercise is almost always worse than the actual experience. Environment redesign for fitness might include laying out your workout clothes the night before, keeping your gym bag packed and visible, or creating a dedicated workout space that's always ready. These visual cues serve as constant reminders and reduce the friction between intention and action. For emotional regulation in fitness contexts, addressing perfectionism is key. By reframing fitness as a progress journey rather than a performance evaluation, you reduce resistance to getting started. Focus on consistency rather than intensity to make each workout feel more accessible. Moving to creative pursuits, we encounter perhaps the most unique form of procrastination, often rooted in fear of criticism and anxiety about meeting expectations. Like a sculptor facing an uncarved block of marble, the creative process can feel simultaneously full of possibility and fraught with potential failure. The bad first draft approach serves as the perfect micro-commitment. Give yourself explicit permission to create something terrible as a starting point. For a writer facing a blank page, this might mean setting a timer for 10 minutes and writing anything regardless of quality. The commitment isn't to create something good, but simply to create something. This sidesteps the perfectionism that often freezes creative action. Environment design for creative work benefits from creating a dedicated creative space, free from usual distractions. This might be a specific corner of your home or a different location entirely, like a cafe, where environmental cues support creative work rather than leisure activities. The emotional regulation techniques for creative procrastination center around managing fear of criticism. This involves reframing creative work as a process rather than a product, setting process-focused goals rather than outcome-focused goals. By shifting attention to the experience of creating rather than evaluation, you reduce emotional barriers to starting. The three-step method's effectiveness comes from its adaptability. By identifying specific emotional triggers and environmental factors that impact your procrastination in each domain, you can create a personalized procrastination interruption system addressing your unique psychology. This targeted approach ensures you're not trying to force generic productivity advice to fit situations where it simply won't work. So here's what we've learned. Procrastination isn't a personal failure. It's your brain attempting to regulate emotions. It's a behavioral pattern involving a clash between your limbic system seeking immediate comfort and your prefrontal cortex planning for the future. Every step you take to overcome procrastination rebuilds your relationship with yourself. Each small victory rewires your brain, creating a positive feedback loop that enhances self-trust and emotional resilience. You deserve that sense of accomplishment and inner harmony, because aligning your actions with your intentions brings genuine freedom. Take a moment to reflect on a recent win against procrastination, however small, and notice how it strengthened your self-trust.